We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the depths of the ocean. Hearing that fact growing up always bothered me, as it meant the Earth has so many mysteries right here just waiting to be explored. While others looked outward, I looked in and focused and found purpose in learning and gaining knowledge of things. My passion in life became archaeology, particularly underwater archaeology. Would it surprise you to learn how many ancient cities and towns now exist only underwater? Archaeological sites such as Atlat Yam Bay and Pavloptri show just how much can be lost over time to the ocean waves. I was working at a field site when I got an unexpected call from a peer. "Diego, how goes it?" I answered. Good, my friend. Sorry to call you out of the blue, but are you still working over there in Egypt?" "Yes, actually. I'm working with the Pythias Corporation for underwater analysis of Thonis Heraclean." Great. Hey, listen. I have a job opportunity for you." Diego rushed through the call. Usually he made much more small talk. "Oh, as I said, I'm working for Pythias. How long do we go back together?" Diego interrupted. "PFFT. Over a decade back when we were doing the exploration at Aulis. But then you went and joined up with that Japanese Sabanto Corp. Well, I need your help. I've got something big, real big, here at Sabanto, and I need someone I can trust with me." His voice was labored. "Sounds serious. Are you okay?" "Yes, well, let's just say I will be better if I can get you here to help." "Well, I can't just walk off the job. This expedition took months to arrange." "Sabanto, I will be reimbursing Pythias if you come." I paused. "What's with the cloak and dagger, Diego? What aren't you telling me?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I can't say much unless you agree to come, but suffice it to say we found something incredible on a recent underwater scan. There's only a few people in the world who do underwater archaeology, and of those you are the only one I can trust." There was another pause. "Please. You'll be compensated insanely for this. Like, imagine a number and I'll add more to that. It should only be a few weeks of work." I sighed. "I'm probably going to regret this, but if you need help that badly, I'll come. I owe you after all." "Thank you, truly. I'll send you over the details, including flights to and then transport on a ship departure out of Okinawa." "Okinawa? Yes, you'll be meeting us at sea." "What have you gotten me into here, Diego?" "Well, what I can say is that it might be the mystery you always said you were looking for." I spotted the vessel I was meeting up with from fairly far away. It was a large ship with the logo of Sabanto Corp emblazoned on it. When my transport pulled up to it, Diego was waiting for me up top. Getting on board with my pack, Diego didn't have his normal exuberance. "I'm sorry again for all this, but I promise this will be worthwhile." Diego came over and helped me lift my bag and ushered me to follow him. We went into the bowls of the Sabanto vessel. I've been on many exploration ships in my life, and this ship was as state-of-the-art as it came. I followed Diego to a room with what seemed to be piles of charts and data, and he hurriedly closed the door behind him while walking back to the table, and he gestured down to them. "What do you know of the Yonaguni pyramids?" As Diego breathed heavily, I shrugged. "Underwater formations off the coast of Yonaguni that look like step pyramids and almost certain to be geological despite their shape. The place was popular with pseudo-archaeology fanatics, which made me roll my eyes a bit." Diego nodded. "And that's what everyone, including the Japanese government, has thought as well." He pulled out a graph chart. A Sabanto ship was doing oil surveying in the area and picked up these readings. I walked over to the chart. "What am I looking at?" Diego pointed to the repeating lines on the graph. "It's some sort of signal or emission." I waited, and it's coming from inside the structure. "Look, it's not a one-off. It repeats on a regular interval before just stopping. There was an earthquake a few weeks ago, and just after the signal was detected, Sabanto decided to investigate further." Diego pulled out another chart. "You can see from this recent topological scan a cave entrance has opened up. I'm not sure I like where this is going." "Well, we sent in a drone sub, and there is definitely an entrance to the formation down there. We mapped it as far as possible with sonar, and it leads to some sort of alcove." Diego's eyes were wide as he went through the map. "There's areas inside there, and for whatever reason outside scans won't show anything through the rock surface. We need to go down and get in there and find out what may be in there." Diego put his hand on my shoulder. "This could be the greatest discovery of our field." I paused a bit before responding, looking at the chart of the newly revealed entrance. "You saved my life back in Aulis, and that was due to me being an idiot and exploring an unsafe and unexplored area. Are we not just repeating that same mistake rushing into this?" A grim look appeared on Diego's face, one I'd never seen before, as he leaned in closer to me. "Sabanto has been having me search up and down the Pacific the last 10 years, searching for unexplained phenomena and locations. When they found out about this ... well, let's just say they have been rumored to make people disappear to get what they want, and they wanted this more than anything. You don't just get to say no to Sabanto Corp. Nothing about this felt right and every instinct told me to abandon this endeavor. But the look on Diego's face told me I was already in too deep. The Yonaguni site is about 26 meters underwater, so it was diveable if a bit difficult. The dark blue of the ocean greeted me as I jumped off the Sabanto ship as the cold Pacific water hit my wetsuit. The sun was shining brightly above and rays pierced the ocean veil to illuminate the site below. The rock formation, for I refused to call it a pyramid, spread out downward. Each was layered on top of the other, with layers stepping downward into the rest of the ocean basalt. Bubbles from the others diving with me obscured my view for a moment. Diego was in front and 3 other Sabanto employees had joined us. Dr. Yui Imagawa was struggling a bit with her scuba gear. Diego told me she was an expert in geology but only had a moderate amount of diving experience, so to keep an eye on her as we went. On my right was a short man and his wetsuit had the name Hachiro written in Japanese and English. Diego said he was a brilliant engineer who specialized in electromagnetism and various forms of signal communication. All made sense from a team standpoint except for the last member. He was a large muscular man and his name read AI. I wasn't an idiot and recognized he was there to watch us for Sabanto. Diego had already told me AI was former JSDF Special Forces and was considered one of Sabanto Corp's fixers, so to watch out and not trust him. Diego led the group downward with AI in the back as the light receded the deeper we went. Diving in the deep is a strange experience as one's senses focus in the relative silence of the water. Your breathing, your heart rate, all can make one feel claustrophobic, as if the ocean itself was collapsing in and around you. That feeling didn't dissipate when we came to the cave entrance about 30 meters down. The handheld and scuba-mounted lights illuminated the entry. I took one last look at the light above and followed Diego in. The cavern had been big enough to fit the drone sub, so logically I knew we could all fit fine, but something about the tunnel felt restrictive, as if it were swallowing me. I've been underwater much of my adult life and never had I felt so unease in a place. All of the team had underwater comms and I heard a call from behind me, so I turned around. Dr. Yui was examining the side of the tunnel wall. "Something wrong, doctor?" I called out. A small buzz of static. "This is not like any rock I've seen before." She rubbed a gloved hand over the side. "It's not igneous or basalt like it should be. This is incredible. We need to keep moving," Diego called over the comms with a tinge of frustration in his voice. The 5 of us continued to swim through the passageway and I caught myself staring at the walls after what Dr. Yui said. There was something strange about them. They were dark in tone and there seemed to be almost organic lines that ran through them, though I reminded myself such things were not possible. We swam for a good 10 minutes before coming to the alcove the drone sub had detected as Diego pushed forward with an uncharacteristic intensity. When I turned the corner, I was initially disappointed as it was just a small area that looked like a dead end when I heard "holy shit" over the comms. Diego was pointing upwards and I looked to see a water line and looked back. "Is there air above here?" I called out, confused. "Well, let's find out," and Diego swam upwards with me following closely behind. We poked out heads out of the water with our lights illuminating the pitch black. There shouldn't be an air pocket. I'm not sure how to describe this sanely. An air pocket only forms underwater when it can't be released, which means some level of airtightness which simply could not be in a stone structure. The rest of the team had now emerged from below and the look of surprise and shock was on all of our faces. There was a nearby ledge and Diego pulled himself up and out of the water looking around. The collective silence was broke by Diego taking off his mask and shouts to stop. I'm not sure if I expected him to start gasping or fall over, but Diego took a deep breath and gave us a shrug. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but this seems breathable." "This isn't possible," Dr. Yui called out over the comms, and I found myself nodding in agreement. "Even if it is, we need to go back. This is an incredible find. We need to get more equipment, sensors." Hachiro spoke up for the first time. No, the cold tone of AI spoke out. "The signal needs to be investigated first." Yui and Hachiro looked at each other before glancing at me and my reaction. I looked over at Diego, who was eye-locked with AI, before nodding sullenly. "Yes, let's see what we can find here first," as Diego pulled himself fully out of the water. A dark tunnel led away from the alcove and he gestured towards it. "All right, enough with this bullshit. What aren't you telling us?" I yelled at Diego, then stared at Yoi, who made no reaction. "How the hell can you not want to go back after this?" Diego looked back to Yoi for a second before sighing. "Sabanto Corp knew something was here. I lied when I said I'd been looking all over the Pacific. I've only been looking here. This place is older than people realize, but only Sabanto seems to think there is something here. And what the hell is here then? Truly, I don't know, but Sabanto Corp believes there is something primordial here. Something that could reshape the world. The company goes back longer than you can imagine, and for whatever reason believes there is something here at this site it needs. I don't know anything beyond that, really." I glanced over to Yui, and Hachiro's looks of confusion confirmed they didn't know anything. Yoi was positioned by where we had entered, and I didn't think anyone was getting past him. "So what?" Keep going or AI here will take care of us. AI swam forward and brought his face in front of mine. You will go forward and complete the task because that's what you are being paid for. These kind of dives are so treacherous. Sometimes accidents happen. I would hate to have to report such an occurrence. Please AI, Diego called out looking back to me. Please. We are on the cusp of discovering something potentially amazing here. Just focus on that. My anger had flared as I locked eyes with AI, but I resigned myself and looked back at Diego. You better not have just saved my life before just to kill me here. We eventually all got out of the water in the small alcove and took off our scuba gear. Nothing was planned for us not to be swimming, so our wetsuits would have to do for exploration. The air was shockingly breathable, though the air had a putrid sulfurous smell which caused my nostrils to flare. I wonder what is producing the air, I called out loud to no one in particular. Dr. Yui was kneeling examining a wall. There's some kind of slime on the surfaces here. I'm not a biologist, but I wonder if it is responsible. Yui ran the slime between her fingers for a few moments, staring at the viscous ooze. She shook her head as if out of a trance. Come on, let's get going. Diego beckoned to the hallway off the alcove. Our flashlights barely penetrated the darkness ahead. The light didn't seem to scatter off the walls and made illumination dim. If the swim earlier made me feel trapped and confined, this was exponentially worse. We came to a point where we had to squeeze through, and after a large antechamber greeted us. It was cavernous, which should have been crushed by the underwater pressures, but here it was. Multiple hallways branched off the room. As any illusion this was a natural formation vanished. This is unbelievable, I called out in amazement. My anger and anxiety temporarily forgotten. Carvings and markings on the wall caught my attention immediately. Diego, come look at this. Diego's flashlight joined mine. There were pictorial reliefs, but nothing I had seen before. Carvings and glyphs all kept showing an image of some sort of amorphous creature with a circle over its head. Creatures appeared often in Sumerian and Egyptian hieroglyphics, but something about this image unsettled me. You see anything like this before? Diego leaned in closer and exhaled hard. Yes. Well, sort of. There are similar reliefs I've seen at various times at Sabanto Corp. What they mean, though, is beyond me, as they never let me study them. I was about to press Diego when Dr. Yui called out, "Where's Hachiro?" We all turned around and the cavernous flashlights tried to illuminate every corner. "Hachiro," I called out to the darkness as Diego and Yui did the same, to no response. Something about the rock didn't echo as I expected. "Yoi, you're supposed to be keeping an eye on us. Did you see where Hachiro went?" Diego called out. No, he was right near me but wasn't when I turned around. Could he have gone down one of the halls here? Nothing seems to echo well here, so maybe he just can't hear us. Dr. Yui's voice was noticeably panicked. All right, shit," Diego was murmuring to himself. "I'll take Yoi and go down this path, and Yui can go with you." He pointed towards me. "In 10 minutes, if you haven't found him, come right back here." Yoi looked like he was going to object, but just nodded and followed Diego down the rightmost path. I tapped Yui on the shoulder and chose one of the paths on the left. It was as dark and winding as the one before, and I had lost mental track of how big the place must have been. We wandered in silence until reaching a bend and a new room opened up to us. The thick slimy muck Dr. Yui had pointed out earlier dripped all over the room as the sulfurous smell almost made me vomit. At the center of the room was an elevated platform with more glyphs and symbols carved into it. I know I should have left, but the platform seemed to call to me. "What the hell is this place?" Yui spoke in Japanese with what I can only assume were curse words before switching back to English. "I don't know, but we should go back and tell the others." Before she finished her sentence, we both leapt backwards at seeing what was at the top. The sprawled form of Hachiro sat at the top, covered in the slimy substance. We rushed over to see his eyes locked open in horror, trying to free him. Yui and I pulled and tore at the goo holding him, only to find his stomach had been torn open, his organs being pulled out individually by the slime tendrils. The sight was finally too much, and I vomited in disgust while Yui screamed. As I fell backwards, I found my right hand unable to move. I turned the flashlight over to see my hand had been trapped in the slime. With every ounce of strength, I managed to dislodge the grip while I screamed out, "Run!" to Yui. Stumbling to my feet, we tried to make it down the hallway, but we tripped on the sticky slime substance several times. Each footstep was labored as we rushed to get back to the main chamber, as we both cried for help. Finally, the dark path came to an end and the cavernous room greeted us. Diego and AI turned their attention towards us as we rushed over to them, screaming how Hachiro was dead in the slime. "We need to get the fuck out of here now," I yelled. Yui was speaking Japanese to Yoi in quick and loud tones while Diego put his hands on me. "Calm down, just show us what you found." I pushed him away. "Fuck that and fuck you, I'm not going back anywhere near that place." Diego looked at Yoi, who was listening to Yui cry and pleading with him in Japanese. "Well, are you going to do anything?" Yoi looked frightened, which was not what I would have expected from the man. "We should get out of here," he called out coolly. The following silence was broken when I realized something with horror. Which way did we come in? I swear the tunnel we came from isn't here anymore. Everyone looked around the room and down the hallways with their flashlights. Did no one mark the tunnel? I don't think this is a mark issue. The tunnel we entered through isn't here anymore. Diego looked down the pathways as he spoke. Yui began trembling and murmuring in Japanese, we shouldn't have come here. There's no point in second guessing. We need to focus on getting out of here. AI gestured to one of the tunnels and made a mark on the side with a knife. We'll go one by one if we have to, but let's find a way out of here. Diego strode forward with Yui behind. I walked next, but I caught another glimpse of the pictures on the wall, the amorphous creature surrounding a sphere. And my heart sank as I turned away and trotted forward. I had lost count of time. The dark halls all seemed to merge with one another. The sickly slime coated everything, and where it was thickest we got stuck. Each time was another few minutes of delay getting free. Each minute was precious. One of the flashlights had already gone out and the light was dimmer on the rest. Sometimes we'd end up back in the cavernous room while others lead to literal dead ends. The place was impossibly large with how much we walked, and it seemed to change shape. Or maybe it was just all in my mind, as I frankly couldn't even tell anymore. Fuck, Diego called out, hitting his flashlight, which had gone out. He threw it against the wall in anger as it shattered. How have we not found the tunnel we came from yet? Yui had become almost comatose just following whoever was in front. Under her breath she kept referencing the slime and Hachiro and needing to go to him. AI's previous calmness was fraying. We are running out of time before we get stuck in the blackness here. No shit. But every time we make one of your marks it is gone next time we come to the corridors. Even when we backtrack, Diego kicked his foot out of a slime patch. I tried to push AI and Diego away from each other when Yui spoke up unexpectedly, there's a voice ahead. All of us turned, and so my surprise there was. Or at least it sounded like it. The four of us pushed forward through the tunnel when we came to the main cavernous area again. In the middle was Hachiro. His wetsuit was ripped and torn, but his body was fine. I stepped forward in shock. You. It can't be. I saw you ripped apart. Hachiro turned to me, his neck cocked to the side just a bit far than should be normal. Come here. Yui began crying and speaking in Japanese as she ran towards Hachiro. Diego and I saw a trail of slime to him and called out to her to stop, but she was picked by AI. And she continued to struggle in his arms trying to get to Hachiro. Let me go. I have to get to him, she broke between English and Japanese. Hachiro looked at Yui struggling in Yui's arms and started to walk towards them. Come to me. Yui threw Yui down and ran at Hachiro full speed with a blazingly fast punch that should have floored Hachiro. Instead, AI's hand was launched in his face. The same slime from before extracted itself around AI's arm, who struggled to get away to no avail while Diego and I looked on in horror. AI cried out in pain as the slime enveloped his arm and began to streak up his shoulder and onto his face. The oozing Hachiro coiled around AI's neck and into his ears, then mouth and eyes. His wails were silenced and his body went limp. Yui sat on the ground watching the spectacle as the face of Hachiro reformed itself and the AI's body was taken by the ooze on the floor. Come to me. Join with me. As Hachiro extended his hand, the hand began to extend longer and longer as it approached Yui, whose shock had taken over. As the hand reached her, it was knocked aside by Diego, who was grasped instead. Run, he called out, the slime hand gasping him. I ran to Yui, who seemed transfixed, and used my body to throw her to her feet. We need to go, now. As I pulled her by the hand down one of the halls, I spared a glance back at Diego, who was face to face with the Hachiro creature. I should have kept running instead as the slime hand pushed its way through Diego and out the other side. Dragging Yui, I ran aimlessly down the dark hallway, hitting my head and shoulders, trying to do anything to just move forward. I ran with no thought, and suddenly I was in free fall, hitting water. My flashlight fell out of my hand and only Yui's remained. In the darkness, it took me a moment to realize this was the water entry we had come through. I looked around and saw our scuba equipment was now covered in the grotesque slime. Several had been punctured and I couldn't free the rest. There was one tank that looked in good enough shape. Come on, Yui. I think we can share this tank and get out of here. I looked up Yui. She was standing facing the tunnel we had come from. I can hear it. It tells me to come. Yui, come on. Whatever that thing is coming, we need to go. It calls to me. It calls to us all. She looked down at me before racing off back into the darkness. I swore again and again as I hastily put on the tank and jumped into the water. There was only a small light on the scuba tank left as I swam through the dark tunnel. Forward and forward I swam as I looked at my O2 gauge. It was reading critical. It must have had a leak after all. While I thought the tunnel passage was confining before the previously organic lines I noticed on the walls were moving. Writhing. As I swam forward, one of the walls grabbed onto me. I tried to kick it off me, but I went no further. The gauge on my tank had moved to empty and I could feel lightheaded. I pulled the tank off and saw there was a tendril of slime holding onto me. I took the tank and bashed at it again and again. As my breath was getting desperate, the slime grabbed onto the tank instead of freeing me. I saw the end of the tunnel to the open sea. My vision was getting foggy as I pushed forward. I pushed and pushed until everything went to blackness. The smell of cigarette made me want to puke as the man across from me took another drag. So that's all you remember, flicking his ash. The next thing I remembered, I was awake here on the Sabanto ship. You told me you had found me floating in the water and then we came in here. The man stared at me before speaking Japanese to another person in the room. Thank you. This has been most helpful. Please, we have to get away from here. We need to make sure that whatever this thing is stays locked away. The man with the cigarette put it out as he got up. Sabanto Corp is perfectly capable of handling the situation. You will be dropped off back on shore. Your services are no longer needed. That's it. 4 team members died and you're just done with this. The man sighed. 3. Dr. Yui also returned. What are you talking about? After we found you, we also found Dr. Yui floating nearby. No. That's not possible. There are no more oxygen tanks left. The man shrugged. You can ask her yourself later. For now, just remain here until we can arrange a transport to shore. He and the other person left the room and closed the door behind them. I watched them from the porthole in the door go down the hall. I watched as the figure of Dr. Yui stopped to speak with them. I watched as Dr. Yui looked back down the hall at me. I watched as her head was cocked just a bit too far, and a tinge of slime was on her lips.